I'm Suresh Emmanuel, CISO of Hatton National Bank. I will be your host today on behalf of Mr. Dilshan Rodrigo. Indeed, it's great pleasure and privilege to be your host today as we embark on a profound exploration of space where technology and finance converge. In our interconnected world, the concept of biometrics is far from unfamiliar. For years, physical biometric markers such as fingerprints, iris scans, and voice recognition have fortified our authentication process. Today, however, we stand at the height of new era, the era of behavioral biometrics. This evaluation acknowledges that our uniqueness is not confined only to our physical attributes alone, but it is also complexly fabricated into how we engage digitally. Globally, behavioral biometrics have emerged and as a transformative force by deciphering the traces of consumer behavior and habits. Organizations can actually ensure the security by streamlining into their interactions and also elevate their customer experiences. Throughout this virtual seminar, we will unfold the potentials of behavioral biometrics and its role in shaping the trajectory of banking. Amidst our exploration of the immense possibilities presented by the behavioral biometrics, we must also confront the real challenges that confront our customers in this digital age. The increased money siphoning apps, the art of social engineering scams, the specter of fraudulent loan applications, and also the ever-looming threat of stolen credentials scams compel us to fortify our defenses. As torchbearers of the financial sector, it falls to us to harness the power of technology while safeguarding our clientele from its pitfalls. With that note, let me introduce our speaker for today, who will be taking us through the topic of combating fraud, scams, and money laundering in 2023, a behavior approach. Mr. Edgar Zayas, Director Global Advisory for BioCatch. Mr. Edgar, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Suresh, and also thank you very much to the Asian Bankers Association for the invitation. And I really hope that everybody today gets a chance to learn a bit more about what behavioral biometrics is. From my side, a quick intro about me. I've been in financial crimes doing everything from digital forensics, e-discovery, and banking fraud most recently in an Australian bank, where I had the absolute privilege of being one of the first in Australia and actually in the APAC region to put to the fire this new concept called behavioral biometrics. And this couldn't have happened at one of the most important times in history, where we saw the shift in fraud and from actually traditional fraud that was just known back then as phishing and malware. It was kind of the approach. Some scams, but with COVID, we saw the astronomical change in the fraud landscape, where it went from phishing and malware, but now it's combining those things to do scams. So behavioral biometrics was the one tool that I fortunately had in my arsenal to quickly leverage. I found myself making a statement a couple of times in the past couple of weeks in personal conversations where I've asked, would I take a job again at a bank? And I said, I'm never saying no. I like where I am and what I do, but if I took a job at a bank, I would not take a job if part of my arsenal did not include behavioral biometrics. And I know that that's a bold statement that I'm making, but I'm hopefully by the end of this presentation, I think we'll be clear on why I would make that statement. So. The company was founded back in 2011, and we are the pioneers and leaders in the industry right now when it comes to behavioral biometrics. Behavioral biometrics is, for those that don't know, is a sophisticated fraud prevention and technique that's now available to implement. And this is possible because we hire some of the most talented data scientists, analysts, and engineers around the world. We have teams everywhere. Our customers are global, We have over 100 banks. 25 of the top 100 are with us. And our primary investors are actually banks. So we are rooted deep into the banking sector. In my region, which is APAC, and where I live in Australia, the big four Australian banks use our technology, and over 15 banks in the Asia Pacific area are also using our technology, and that is growing at an exponential rate right now. Just to give you an idea of what makes us good at what we do is the ability to learn from everyday fraud in real time. So we have about 7 billion sessions per month, banking sessions that are occurring per month, and that's over 400 million users throughout the globe. And while we're processing all this data in secured Azure hosting, where we scale up very quickly as well. Innovation-wise, we have over 60 patents, including 58 granted, and it's all over different topics such as remote access and scans, authentications. Our technology helps solve new use cases that we'll see today when we talk about meals and scams. So what we're going to do today, we're going to take you through a little bit of a journey. We're going to go and talk about fraud trends around the world, and then come back into our area, into our region. We're going to then talk about those and then dive a little bit deeper on what's going on in there. Once we talk about those trends, then I want to give you a little spiel about what is behavioral biometrics and how I can address those topics. And we'll also get into some actual examples of how behavioral biometrics works for these. So let me start with the global landscape threat landscape. North America, we're seeing a lot of social engineering, and we're going to start seeing a little bit of a theme here around the world. Social engineering, the flavor is romance scams, or they call them pig butchering. In the investment scams, probably the largest losses that are happening. With the social engineering and the scams, we have a lot of fast payment scams. So there's particular services in the US for fast payments, such as Zelle, which are being exploited to get people to send money, with the typical pretexts of helping somebody, or as we're going to see later, talk about goods and services and other scams that originate through social media. The other topics that we have in North America is a lot of real accounts and issues around account opening. There's a lot of farms with bots and call centers with people just opening a lot of these fake accounts that are used for money laundering purposes. And the majority of this money laundering is happening with proceeds from scams and frauds. Latin America, the hot topic there is definitely stolen devices. A lot of people are getting their devices stolen. And when that happens, the first thing that occurs is they are locked out, and then they're locked out of their devices, and then their bank accounts are drained. In some instances, even the phones are used to scam some other people that are known to that person. So it's a very big problem right now in America. The social engineering, voice scams through voice over IP. So WhatsApp is probably the main one where all these scams are originating. And there's a lot of mobile malware also going after LatAm banks and their customers. In Europe, we have similar to fast payments and APP fraud. And again, that's the making payments for after people have been scammed through either a social media ruse or some other pretext. But it's exploiting the ability to make a payment and receive that payment very quickly. Remote access is also a big problem in Europe. Again, tying back into the social engineering and allowing people to take control of your computer to help you out, let's say, do a little bit of investing. So a lot of that going around. Cross-channel fraud. So we have now where the fraudster takes over the account, but then moves the funds into an account that's linked to a card via be it credit or debit, and then the money is stolen via provisioning the card number on Samsung Pay or Google Pay, and then going and tapping those funds out, avoiding the usual digital to digital channel transfers. And in Europe, we're also seeing then stolen devices starting to pick up as well in the UK. Then now coming over into our region, we have the Asia Pacific region. The hot topic definitely for sure is this umbrella of call center scams. So we have call centers that have been set up throughout our region, and they're just perpetrating a lot of the problems that we're seeing out there when it comes to romance scam, investment scams, impersonation scams. I think everybody has pretty much in their life experienced one of these one way or another, or in a close degree, a relative, where somebody has tried to impersonate either a government agency or a bank. And these are all originating from call centers in different countries. Mobile malware is also taking a name at our regions. A lot of these call centers are leveraging mobile malware. They're calling up a customer, telling them they're the bank, or that they're an energy provider, or let's say an internet service provider, and convincing them to install an application, not unlike the remote access issues, but this is related to malware, where then they will use that malware to take remote control of a device and access accounts or steal information off of them. And the other hot topic, again, is mule accounts in our region. Again, they have to move the money around. So a lot of these call centers are devoting time and effort into creating these fake accounts, or either creating them or recruiting people to give them access to bank accounts to do the money laundering. So let's dive a little bit deeper into the APAC region. India, we'll start off with India. I was there recently, and by far, the India population is having a surge of fraud and scams related to UPI. With UPI payments, it's a form of fast payments. So we're seeing people getting scammed using channels like WhatsApp and Telegram and Line, engage with citizens and then convince them to send money. So a lot of that fraud also comes from the barcodes that they use with UPI. So these are being leveraged as well. A lot of this, again, source can be phishing. So people are phished on WhatsApp or via traditional SMS. And that's usually where the source of problems start. One of them being the mobile malware, where somebody might think that the link that they're clicking on is something valid, and they end up downloading some mobile malware. Mule accounts are a big problem as well. The mule accounts is actually a merge of scams with mule accounts, where people are being tricked into opening an account, handing over the account to a fraudster, and then they're perpetrating the UPI fraud and other sorts. And also investment scams are also starting to rise in India. In Singapore, we got a lot of friend impersonation scams. That is by far something that's just changing, and I can see a different one every week. When I take a look at the Singapore Scam Alert site, they just change and vary the story, but it's this friendship scams, and they're just leveraging the, how nice and how cooperative people are in Singapore, and that aims to be able to help others. So a lot of the friendship scams are happening there. Employment scams are happening as well, and these are direct result of legislation that Singapore has put in, where they're making it harder to get mule accounts. So, including people that were willingly giving out their banking accounts, now they are trying to make things a little bit. They've made things a lot harder by putting legislation with hefty penalties around allowing people to use your bank account. So now people are getting tricked into thinking that they're in an employment situation, and when they give the bank account or give access to bank accounts to do their work, and the reality is that they're muling money. So a lot of those employment scams coming around. E-commerce, a lot of fake products being put up there in different sites, either social media sites or social media ads advertising a website that is not selling legitimate products. It's just they just show a marked down product, and the reality is there's nothing to buy. A lot of malware infections as well. They're being infected through bank SMS links, where it's impersonating the bank, and people think that they need to update their bank account, bank app, or other ruses there as well. that eventually leads to some malware being installed that allows people, the fraudster, to have remote access to the device and begin, their path of destruction. 1 second there. Now, Southeast Asia is where we're seeing the call center issues. We'll get a little bit more in depth there, but these call centers are operating out of Southeast Asia. There's some call centers in India as well, but mostly the issue is around the Philippines, Myanmar, and other countries. Again, we're seeing the same problem, and we're seeing that same theme over and over again. Mobile malware hitting, social engineering scams, looking for those high dollar, high value paydays where it comes to investment scams and romance scams. Those are usually could be paired together, or you can see a romance scam turning into an investment scam, or a romance scam turn into just stealing money from a victim and then using the victim's account for muling purposes. And then there's a lot of also QR code exploitation of QR codes to deceive people into making payments into the wrong accounts. Hong Kong, again, social engineering scams back left and right. We're seeing the pattern here. We need to launder that money. So we got mule accounts. And once again, QR codes became very popular way of paying things over COVID and doing a lot of things in our lives. So those are getting exploited as well. And where I live in Australia, we are receiving a lot of these call centers. The calls are originating from, and they are, doing a lot of banking impersonation, convincing people to move their money from one bank to another. And in reality, they're moving it into instead of from one account to another under their own customer's name. It's a fraudster account, and that fraudster account is again a mule account. So a lot of problems with bots and just call centers opening up a massive amount of these accounts to be able to move their funds around. Phishing, a lot of that, and with the intent to do account takeover, but a lot of the phishing ends up as well with card fraud, inevitably lead to other types of social engineering scams as you end up putting yourself pretty much on a call list for fraudsters. Remote access scams also popular, but those have gone down considerably in Australia. Nonetheless, there's still a problem. There's still a vector for what the customer support that these call centers actually offer. A lot of these actually will be very supportive and remote into your computer and help you set up your investment accounts, set up a new bank account. So they're still leveraging those tools. And mobile malware is often seen in the target list of new malwares that are coming out there. New Zealand and Australia pretty much mimic themselves in what comes after them. New Zealand usually sees it a little bit after than us. So that's what the current trends in APAC are, but with a little focus on these call center gangs. Organized crime is running these call centers and mainly staffed, unlike India. In India, we have these call center situations where you might have a legitimate call center, and then maybe a little back room has another type of call center running. And these are people that are gainfully employed, and they're gainfully participating, willingly participating in these activities. Whereas what we're seeing out of the Southeast Asia side is in the COVID era, where these gangs used to do human trafficking for purposes of sexual exploitation. They had to shift because of lockdowns and all that, and they started using them at these call centers now to perpetrate a lot of the scams that we're seeing. Not a lot, but pretty much all of them, we would think by this point. A lot of this is coming out of Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Philippines, as you can see. And there's no shortage of the news articles that have been coming out over and over the past couple of months of these call centers getting busted and a lot of people being rescued. It's not just that there's a victim at the other side of the phone, but who's getting victimized, but it's also the person that is committing the crime is actually a victim themselves in these cases. If we dive in a little bit deeper, what's happening, and we talked about these topics at a really high level. If we start getting a little bit in there, with the malware topic, we have these malwares that are actually siphoning money out of bank accounts. So you'll get an SMS with whatever ruse might be. You want a prize, or you'll get that call that says you need to update your banking app, we have detected an issue, whatever that might be. Once you install that, the malware allows the device to be controlled by the fraudster, leading the money to be exfiltrated out of bank accounts. There is a variation of this malware as well, where it's just stealing a lot of information, and then the fraudster uses this information to, if they've stolen cards, to just do card fraud with other methods, or if they've stolen your username, your passwords, and even your OTP codes get forwarded from your SMSs to the fraudster. And now they're able to either provision a card through one of the fast payment apps, or they are able to log into your bank account from a different device and then do those transfers. And unknowingly, your SMSs with the OTP codes, you're not seeing them, they're getting forwarded to the scammer, and that's where they go to town on your account. The social engineering scams, again, romance, investment. Romance usually leads into the investment. That's where we're seeing the majority of the issues going into. A lot of the investment stuff is crypto. Although in the Southeast Asia area, I've seen variations, not just with the crypto bit, but there are people still scamming just with legitimate offerings of a company, like it had been happening with investment scams for years and years back, where you're getting in this company, you need you can buy some shares and whatnot. And so it's not just the crypto. I know that a lot of people think that it's just crypto that's currently a problem, but no, there are variations to this. In Australia, there's a variation to this where it's people selling banking bonds. So it looks really legitimate. They actually take legit documents from banks and doctor them and have this whole conversation. And it generally looks like you're investing in an actual bank. So it's hard to catch these, but it is happening a lot. Goods and services not being delivered as well. Like I mentioned earlier, fake websites, social media ads, just advertising things way below rate, and then people jumping on those and not only giving their money away that they thought they were buying something, but then they're actually giving all their card details away as well, and personal information. Fraudulent loan applications is actually big too in Southeast Asia. We're seeing a lot of identity theft, just take out loans or take out new credit card products. So a lot of that going on. A lot of people getting convinced into opening these new accounts and then moving the money into another account and inadvertently not realizing that they took a loan out, but then that loan is what they think they were using it for, ends up being in a fraudster's name afterwards. Stolen credentials and scams. I spoke about it. Phishing, traditional phishing. We got the voice phishing as well. A lot of this stuff is coming through the voice over IP apps, not just your traditional phone. So we got Line, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, it's happening as well. So through all these channels, a lot of people are just getting bombarded with both calls or impersonations of friends. A lot of people connect the dots through Facebook that a mother and their children or their elderly children, and then start beginning to scam there, asking for money over WhatsApp, saying that, hey, I lost my phone, I'm using a friend's phone, all these kind of things. And that leads to giving people access to either funds or an account, or giving away codes, or simply convincing the person to send money. And none of this is possible. Every single thing that I've spoken about today, none of it is possible unless they have one thing, which is money mules. They need money mules. They need mule accounts to do these things. There is different, I've seen from, we're going to talk a little bit deeper about the mule accounts, but we've even seen recently where there's insider threats at banks where people are deliberately allowing accounts to clear KYC. That's becoming a problem as well. For traditionally, it's been like somebody's opening up the accounts or somebody's handing over their account. Now we're seeing that people are opening the accounts and then an insider is helping facilitate that account, bypassing controls. We've spoken about all this, and I made that bold comment of I would not manage a team again unless I had behavioral biometrics technology. So let me have a little conversation about that to back that statement up. So behavioral biometrics, what is it, and why is it the tool that you need in your arsenal? So we'll take you through a little bit of a journey. The first thing that we do is collect data. So the data that we're collecting is no different than the data that is being collected by many others. So we're collecting, keystroke movements. We're collecting from a desktop or a laptop, keystrokes, mass activity, and from how your mobile device moves and the different sensors that are in those mobile devices. We're collecting those data points and start to form a picture. So what does that picture look like? Well, we're looking at how you're swiping, how you're holding your phone, what your interaction looks like, and your preferences in those devices. If you're tremoring your eye contact with the device, your hand and eye coordination, how fast you type or how fast you swipe, and how you navigate. So all these things, when you're actually using the phone, you're starting to show your behavior of how you look and how unique you are. I'm going to pause there though with one very big caveat. When we collect data, we do not collect anything that's PII. So anything that's personal and identifiable, that we are not collecting. We do not collect from the banks. We do not collect anything that the customer is typing in. When it comes to names and descriptions and all these other things, we don't see that. What we see is that you press the key, we can distinguish that it's a special key or it's a letter or it's a number, but which one it is exactly, that part we do not collect. And quite frankly, we've proven successfully that we don't even need that, because again, it's the behavior of how you're doing that that's more important. Once we've collected that data, we start looking at what you're doing with that. And then we start piecing it together with, a little bit of cognitive analysis. And what do I mean by that? Well, you're pressing keys, right? So maybe you start using something a little bit sophisticated like an alt tab. Well, who uses alt tab? What population knows what an alt tab is? And what does that say about your savviness with a computer? If you're a person that does that, and you do that always versus somebody that doesn't do that, we can now start painting a picture about who you are and what your skills are. Start forming a picture of who you are as a unique individual. When you're interacting with the banking site, we start realizing, again, based on how you're typing and swiping and doing all these things, if you're using your short-term memory or your long-term memory. So stuff like, in the US, whether you use social security numbers or your date of birth, those things come from either, things come from short-term or from long-term memory. And again, it's how you're inputting data that we start forming that picture where that's coming from. We can see that, again, those are normal interactions where somebody's starting to do things that they don't normally do, copy pasting, selection of things, just hesitations when you're trying to decide what to do here or there. Just in one of the examples we'll see, just aimless movement of your mouse. All of that shows some level of cognitive things that are happening. So when we pair these two things up, at the top of our triangle, then now we have the good stuff. It's the intelligence that we get from these two. Pairing these together and using data science and machine learning, we're able to now come back and say, all right, we know that this person might be under duress because they are hesitating. The way you do a payment, if you're going to pay right now, you forgot to pay the kid's school trip, for example, you know how you're going to pay that. You come in and you're hustling and you're going to pay that. You know where to add. You're familiar with your banking app. You're going to do that in a particular way. But if somebody is trying to convince you to invest a lot of money, you're going to start behaving a little bit different. If somebody has stolen your device and you want to stolen your device and they're trying to convince you to give a PIN and do certain things and move money, you're going to behave differently. So those hesitations or distraction, the familiarity that you have, maybe you don't add bank accounts all the time to your bank account. Now you're trying to figure out how to add this bank account that somebody's telling you. All these behavioral changes start sending out alerts and indicators that we can provide to the financial institution so that they can take action. So all of our stuff is passive. Everything that we're doing is passive. We send the signals. It's the signals, it's intelligence that the bank then uses, and the bank decides what actions to take when the payment is happening or when the login occurs. So this graphic just kind of demonstrates that you got the human behavior, you got that, the coordination. All these things are happening on the human side. We take a look at that because, like I mentioned earlier, we have 7 billion sessions happening every month. We get better every day at figuring out what normal looks like, what anomalous looks like, what looks like when you're changing your behaviors. And that leads to that intelligence again. We can, there's multiple users using one account. How fluent you are with the information that you're putting into maybe an application when you're getting a loan. So we can even do analysis and decipher what age you're in. That's a lot to talk about. Let's actually do a little bit of use cases here. There are 4 areas that a bank can use behavioral information behavioral intelligence to start combating fraud. So in account opening, account takeover, we got our scams, and we got the money laundering. All those things that we saw previously. In every single one of these areas, we can look at behavior and start bringing the fight back. So I'm going to go over each one of these. Each one of these, I could probably spend an hour as well on them. So what I'm going to do is just give you a little bit of a sample. So this is just one little bit of behavioral area, but there's a lot more that happens with each one of these areas when we tackle them. I'm going to start with account opening. And one of the examples that we like to give is that because we've learned with so many sessions that we've seen, we've done the analysis. We know that people type faster when they are younger, and they pretty much keep that same typing pattern up to the age of 40. When you reach the age of 40, your typing speed starts declining. And I had a very bright gentleman recently tell me, I type really fast. That's not accurate. And I said, yes, you do. But I bet if you talk to 20-year-old you would tell you I type faster than 45-year-old you right now. Still type fast, but your typing speed probably declined from your typing speed when you were in your 20s. That's just a fact of life. And we've actually profiled enough to say, hey, somebody's filling out this application to open up a new account, and they've declared that their age is 80, and we can see that the typing pattern and typing rhythms that they're using are consistent with people in the global population that we've seen and examined with that age group, that age bucket. Whereas you will have a fraudster, they're trying to meet their, they got KPIs at these call centers as well, right? So they're trying to meet their metrics, they're trying to open these accounts, they're trying to start, selling them or distributing them, whatever they're going to do with them. And they're going to type a lot different than somebody that's 80 years old. So that is something that we can pick up through, again, an analysis of the keystrokes, what keystrokes are using, how fast you're typing, milliseconds that takes. When it comes to account takeover, I bundled 2 examples here in one. So it's remote access tools. And so there's usually 2 racks that people sometimes get confused. There's racks that are remote access tools, which are legitimate tools that are used to access some TeamViewer, AnyDesk. These are typical tools that people use for legitimate reasons. These are perfectly great companies, and we've all been supported in one way or another with one of these tools. Unfortunately, they've been leveraged for badness as well. And then you have rats that are remote access Trojans. So it's malware that allows remote access. In the example in the top row, what we see here is we're looking at how people are swiping on their phones. So we can see that user scrolls with left and right fingers. We see where they're scrolling, how fast, and all that other good stuff. User scrolls mostly with the right fingers. They're using right-handed mostly. So we now know that this user is right-handed and that they shake a fair bit. We can see the motion and that they shake a fair bit. Now enter somebody that's using your device via a remote access session. Now we got different things. We don't see swiping. We see very precise tapping. we'll see that the scrolling is different. Now it's very, instead of a swipe with your hand, which is more archy, and we'll see that there is more linear scrolling. And we'll see that then that again, what thumbs they're using, the right or the left one, they will notice that those things are changing, as well as they're not screen presses, but very precise point taps, which means that somebody's probably clicking with the mouse. So it just depending on what tool you're using, how that might be portrayed. So profiles are unique and they're anonymous. We don't really know who the person is, but what we do know is that whoever's using the account right there does not look like the previous the person that had been previously using it. One example that we like to show is this heat map, where we can see where the touch and it's consistent, and then where this deviation starts occurring. So again, this is what we start profiling over time, and the machine learning models create a profile for each customer and knows how you behave, and then when something else is deviating from that, we'll see that there's like those taps there that are not consistent, or that the pressure on the screen is also not consistent, in case somebody has taken your device, not the same person using it. You can see the fraud session over here. You can see those, again, those precise touch events with no movement at all. So there's very little dots. So there's dots, taps, the screen is moved, being pressed, but there is no actual pressure on the screen. There is actual no movement on the phone. So how is that happening? We all gonna have some kind of tremor in our hands when they're using our app. So we can see that the swipes are also different. They're not, they're linear. They just completely changed from what it normally was. And it's occurring in areas where it's not normally occurring, because that's not where they press, their thumb reaches. Moving along into social engineering scams. So this is the big one. The example we'd like to give here is the mouse. So regular users, we've examined how much you actually doodle with your mouse. So if you think about it, if somebody interrupts you, what do we usually do? If we're holding our keyboard or mouse, we start kind of doodling around with our mouse. So on the left side, we see a legitimate session where people are moving with purpose. They're going from one field to the next field and using their mouse to actually do regular actions. When you're being coached, your mouse behavior completely changes, because you're listening to somebody's giving you all these different bits of information. And even in some of the scams that I've done myself, when you're tell them you're about to you're in it and you're going to send them money, they scramble to find an account that for you to send money to. And at that point, when you're waiting around, you start doodling. They'll even find themselves sometimes not giving you the right account number, and then you're backtracking. And again, you're behaving differently than if you were about to pay somebody for something, a service that you know and you're familiar with. Mule accounts. With all the sessions analyzing mule behavior, we've actually come out with these 5 personas, from more complicit to less complicit. The deceiver part is what we've spoken about at account opening. It's somebody's using somebody else's identity and opening an account, and that we can get with an account opening. At the other end of the spectrum, we have where maybe malware, or somebody convinced you, fished you to give your information out, and now there's account takeover. But this is the little middle part where we have either somebody that decides that they're going to sell their account, or that they're going to participate in a fraud or a scam and use their own account for it, or somebody that has been deceived, which is usually the case of somebody in a romance scam where they've been deceived. They think they're giving somebody access to the account to do something, something a favor, but in reality, they're using their account for something bad. These personas behave differently. And again, we analyze that behavior to be able to figure out that something bad's going on. In the case of, I have this one example that groups 3 of them. So the deceiver, the peddler, and the accomplice. So these are the people that know that they're doing something bad. And usually these accounts are open. And we see here, if I can, I don't have my laser pointer, but we can see here at the beginning that the account is open. And then what we see is that it goes dormant. So some of these accounts are put to sell, up for sale on the dark web, or they're just collected, or they take a while to do something with them because they're waiting for the actual physical debit card to arrive. And then they have all these cards, and then they package them all up and then put them up for sale. So there's a period of dormancy. which is a behavior that's not consistent then with most of the population. After a while, then that account gets sold, or now somebody's going to do something with it. So we see a flurry of activity that happens. And then what follows after that is a bunch of large inbound payments, just hitting and hitting and hitting over and over again. A particular thing here to notice is with a proper behavioral analysis, you go from being in a position of detecting, which is you're now acting on the transactions and now having to remediate the problems around that, to a prevention opportunity. Your opportunity to detect things now shifts over to before the problem occurs, by once again seeing that behavior is different. And when that critical point is about to happen, you have these models that are firing and giving you these warnings. I'm going to conclude here. And that's a lot. I mean, each one of these topics I could keep going on for a while. I want to give some time for questions. In my conclusions, I sat down and I thought really hard, what are the things that I want you to take away today? And these are the points here. The social engineering scams at a high level, they're the same throughout the world. It's at the end of the day, somebody's convincing somebody to do something that they don't want to do willingly. The tactics, the techniques, and the procedures that they use, they change. They change their game every now and then. They'll change their tooling and all these things. Their campaigns change as well. Their fraud emails change. But one thing is always consistent: behavior. The behavior of our victims and the behaviors of the fraudsters. Those things are always there. Those are consistent. Those are things that even when they change, the fact that they change is the signal that we need to then be able to take action on it. Physical biometrics, we're seeing that things like face and voice, it's not a sci-fi thing anymore. Deepfakes are real. They are being leveraged already. The voice, both in video form and in voice form, we're seeing that they're being cloned and they're being used to impersonate people. These things can be bypassed. Behavior is unique. That is a brilliant detection opportunity to use. So behavioral biometrics, that's not a buzzword. It's not one of more of these marketing things that you're hearing around. It is actually a piece of technology that you need in your fraud shop or AML shop to start combating things. So.
Thank you, Edgar, for shedding the light on the potential of behavioral biometrics in the realm of banking. So let us move into the Q&A session. So let me start off with the questions, right? So the very first one. So could you share some practical examples of how financial institutions in the region have successfully integrated these behavioral biometrics to enhance the both security and customer experiences? So you can probably touch upon key factors, so key success factors of how, and the key challenges probably certain institutions have gone through when they try to practically drive this implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we went through a couple of those examples, but I can definitely drill in some of the examples. Some institutions are just bogged down on the account opening side. They just receiving an influx of bad accounts that are being opened, and they've implemented technologies like liveness checks. But these technologies require a human to be actually there and actually monitoring them. So by putting this behavioral layer in there to complement that technology, now we can say, you know what, we're not even going to look at that one. That one's just behaving really bad from the go. That we're not going to allow to open. So we have banks just implementing the technology that way, not as a silver bullet, but it's a complement to the other controls, which is a very important thing. Behavioral biometrics does not replace the control. In a lot of the banks are just using it to supplement it. A lot of banks are using it also to do a step-up authentication. So they will, instead of sending just an SMS, they'll send an email or they'll send an in-app message to a registered phone, because the behavior in the payment session, it just looks off. So they're going to step it up again. And they also use it to reduce friction. So if they're seeing that all the telemetry looks fine, this is a device, this is a person, the behavior is consistent, you know what, we're not gonna do another step up, or we're not gonna even send a code as well. So depending on the country, there's some cost savings there as well for the bank. So it's used to reduce that friction as well. It can be used both ways. I've seen a bank also use it at call centers to detect that the person that's on the other side and accessing account might be a fraudster and not the customer themselves. And they're trying to do a change or a transfer via phone, but they have access, digital access to the funds. So they're seeing and using the behavior as well of that session to detect that, hey, I'm probably not talking to the right person. So they'll take some action there as well.
Okay, great answer. And I'd also like to pose another question on this, Edgar. So basically, that as we navigate through this path of money mules, money laundering, and it's also evident that individuals can unwittingly become participants of these, fraudulent activities. So how can behavioral biometrics be harnessed to detect and prevent such scenarios? And what kind of or level of collaborations between the banking industry, law enforcement, and regulatory bodies could amplify the effectiveness of these efforts? So it's just not one system, it's actually an ecosystem of multiple systems. So that how we can harness these efforts together to combat these frauds.
Absolutely. No, that's a brilliant question. Again, what I usually say, behavior is king. When somebody is being tricked into using their account, it's somebody that's been a customer at the bank for years now, and the bank has built a nice profile around them. Again, the behavior changes. If they give the access to their account, we can see that the devices that are using the account, the networks that are using the account are not consistent. You have somebody that's in their 70s, now having a device that's in a different continent using a VPN. These are not normal behaviors for that person. So we immediately see that when we speak to the customer, when the bank speaks to the customer, the bank says, no, everything's fine. And we see that the behavior in the account doesn't match. The person is not in Europe. They are still in APAC region. So why is it that your account's being used by somebody in another region? Again, your behavior changes. And again, those signals that we're getting, we're seeing that those operators of those accounts, once they do that account takeover and they begin muling the funds, those are signals that, again, we can share with both law enforcement or banks in Australia particularly, have come together now. They are forming a consortium where we're exchanging device identifiers and different bits so that the data sharing can be in real time. Some banks are in discussions in other regions as well about establishing some kind of risk factor on their accounts and being able to share those risk factors in real time when a payment's going to occur. So the sky's the limit when it comes to what do we do with this intelligence. We've gathered all this. We have all the telemetry that says the behavior has changed and that behavior is not consistent with the customer, but consistent with somebody that's doing money laundering. Now it's what can we action from there? And that's the beautiful part, that everybody can work together. Law enforcement can work together. Regulators can work together, again, to make sure that the fraudsters don't have the upper hand by having the better set of tools. And we can work with them as well to ensure that customers' privacy and is respected and never compromised as well when we're using behavioral elements.
Okay, so Edgar, I think there are a couple of interesting questions from the audience as well. So probably with the interest of time, we'll pick a couple of them for us to address at this point. So I think one interesting question is, as a bank, how can we help protecting and preventing about these scams? But because is it the responsibility of the customers as well to protect their accounts, or is it mostly the customers come to the bank and point the bank to on whatever the frauds they face? Sometimes their negligence also has a kind of contributed to complement this kind of frauds, also sharing their OTPs kind of activities. So it's probably a tricky questions, but who takes the responsibility of this kind of scams? But end of the day, both the parties are impacted. So how you can, do you have any opinion on this, Edgar?
Yes, and it's an opinion at the end of the day, and then maybe at that point with that question, I'll do one thing, which is I'll take my BioCatch hat off for 2 seconds and say that this is my personal opinion, and which is this technology, that this is happening because this technology was given to the customer. So it is the responsibility of those that have given that technology to them to figure out how to safeguard that technology as well. The same way we invented cars and we had to figure out how to make the car safer and put seatbelts on it, and we still build cars and we still make a cool car, but we got to make sure that if it's in a collision, it's not going to get tipped over just by hitting it. We got to do the same thing with our banking app. So my thought is that yes, it is both parties' responsibilities, but the scams that we're seeing out there are so real. The risk of infection of malware through just you can get infected with malware just by downloading a legitimate calculator off of the Google Play Store, and that's through no fault of their own. And then that information gets stolen, and it gets leveraged to call them up and scam them, or to do a account takeover directly from their phone. And all I did was download a calculator. So again, it is on us to then figure out, in the banking sector, it's to figure out how to protect our apps, how to put those controls in, so that when the human inevitably fails, we can do something about it. And this is it right here. This is why I'm doing what I do, because I saw that it was behavior that changed, and behavior is what made me aware that something wasn't right. We're seeing, we're seeing that in the UK, the liability is going to start splitting up. It's going to be split up between both banks, because at the end of the day, you only have the problem of where the funds got stolen from, but somebody else had to receive them. So, and this is nothing new. It's AML, it's money laundering. That regulation has been there for years and years and years. So it is also the responsibility of the receiving bank to make sure that they don't have a way to move the money around. So if we got rid of the mule account, if we attacked, and it would be a lot harder to do scams, because you just have nowhere to put it. You'd see scams changing to people trying to go convince somebody to go to a bank and withdraw money to then take physical money, because they can't do it digitally. So we can see how everything, and at the end of the day, it's about taking our own responsibility about the things that we have control over. We don't have control over the scammers. We don't have control over fraudsters, but we do have control over our own ecosystems.
Okay, so let's move into another question from the audience. So what type of scams do you see or expect to emerge out of AI or deepfake video? What measures would you recommend counteracting this modus operandi?
Fantastic also question. Very it's, again, that one's no longer like sci-fi. That is actually happening. So the ones that I'm expecting or that I've seen, and I'm going to see them ramp up, will be beginning with the voice ones, where a sample of a voice like mine being recorded right now, they're going to mimic it. And then what they do with that, we're going to see an evolution. So in Australia, we were seeing last year what we're calling the Hello Mom scam, where they were WhatsApping somebody and saying, "Hey mom, I'm stuck and I lost my phone. Can you send me $2,000 so I can buy a new one and get back," or whatever. This is going to change now. It's not going to be like, "What's this message?" It's going to be an actual call impersonating my, voice calling my mother, elderly mother, and she thinks that it's really me. So that is like an imminent and real threat that's occurring, and that's going to evolve into the video one as well. We're seeing that deepfakes are being used to try to bypass liveliness checks when doing account opening, or for the more sophisticated banks that have now like online chat support and allow to see the customer. That's going to be implemented for that as well. So it's not it is happening. Again, the fortunate part is that doesn't matter, because if you think about it, behavior is still what gives things away. You might sound like me, and my mom might send money. But again, if we're looking at the mule account behavior, that account's still behaving like a mule. It doesn't matter how that account looks like in real life or in a video or sounds like, that account's not looking right. Her moving the money very frantically, it's somebody that usually doesn't use online banking. She's going to also set off a lot of alarms and because she's doing behavior that's not consistent for her. So it doesn't matter. It's no different. A deep fake is no different for me right now than putting on a different mask. Your behavior is still not the consistent behavior of the victim, or your behavior as somebody that's operating a mule account. That's still the same, regardless of what mask you're wearing and how you're wearing it.
Okay, so we'll take another question, which is basically, what are the benchmark data? So different countries users, have different behaviors based on their demography and their cultures. So isn't that mean that we can't have a generalized data across the board, or how you benchmark this data across the board for different demographics?
Yes, very good observation. Indeed, there are things that we can look at a global level to try to come up with certain things. But what we do with each customer is we actually train our models for every single customer, and every single profile or every single of the bank's customers has their unique profile as well. So we train the data on that specific population. When we enable the customer, our brilliant engineers, we go through a process where we're training the model. So there is a base model, but then that model with machine learning, where AI and machine learning comes in, that model learns from looking at that specific customer's population, how they use the app, and how they've configured us on the app as well. The more visibility that we have, the more telemetry that we have, the more we can build these profiles. So yes, it's not a blanket thing. A good example of that is just the mules. Mules behave different from region to region, and we do train our models, and even from customer to customer, because how they're trying to bypass a control in one bank is a lot different than another bank, because of just how they've coded their apps or their websites, what it allows people to do. So yes, we actually do take in consideration that. There are lessons that we learn from a global scale, and then there are lessons that we go from macro to micro.
Okay. So I think there's another question which related to, again, the AI related one, which you just demonstrated about the, detecting fake voices. So is there any artificial intelligence apps will be installed to our phones to detect fake voices? This is critical for us in banks because we confirm transactions from clients.
Correct. We're not detecting, again, we're purely behavior, so we're not detecting that a voice is that a voice is not who they say they are. That call might be happening on one device, and the banking session might be happening on a different device. So there are some things we do around that area, but it's not around the analysis of the voice or of the face or the video. Or of the photo. That area is not a behavioral side of things. We specialize specifically on looking at the behavior, and it's mainly because of that, because it's going to be quite invasive. B, it could happen while the banking app is not open, and the banking app, if you're looking at an iPhone, has no reach outside the banking apps ecosystem. So it's not going to be able to listen into a call. So fundamentally at a technological level, it just can't be done. It would be something that, one of the two big companies would have to leverage themselves. But again, that's why we fall back and double down on the behavioral side, because that is something, what's in our control, that it's in our control. We're not in control of what's happening in WhatsApp. That's siloed in there, and it would be quite honestly very scary for everybody if we could be listening to one app, could be listening to what's happening on your other app. Pretty sure that there's laws in every country around that as well.
Okay, so there's another question on the tracking anomaly behavior. So when there's a newly onboarded customer where we don't have much of historical data to predict his behavior, is that mean that newly born onboarded customer is kind of vulnerable until a point, or how it works? So maybe certain algorithm like the benchmarking and maybe certain other ways you have in terms of to complement for newly onboarded customers.
Yeah, so out of the box, the model knows certain things, but like I mentioned earlier, it has to be trained up. So to the question of, it's going to take a couple of weeks to train those profiles up. It will start. There's the stuff that just looks bad right out the gate. So if you're in Australia and your account's being used in Russia, that just looks bad. Like there's something going to light up right out of the box. Right out the gate. But yes, it needs a little bit of time to train. And if the customer is vulnerable, well, to respond to the part of if they're vulnerable, well, they were already vulnerable, because if you don't have the technology at all, then they're really in a mess. So yes, it takes a little bit of training. It takes some time to learn it, but it's a matter of weeks. But yes, right out the gate, there are certain scenarios that we can start immediately addressing right out the gate as soon as the customer is onboarded and behavior is started to be analyzed.
Yeah. So also, Edgar, we understand that no solution is foolproof, and sometimes there are scenarios, and where how much of percentage of accuracy you, or in terms of false positiveness, you came across through your lab testing, and you throughout your testing you have done for your solution.
So the testing for on the false positive side of things, there are going to be false positives, and some of those false positives are what I call they're actually not really false positive. Some action was actually happening. So maybe there was remote access on a banking session, but the remote access was valid because somebody was accessing their work computer from home, and it will light up those indicators of remote access happening with and a payment going out. That's the intelligence is there, and it is correct. It is alerting you that it's just that the intent is something that we'll never be able to predict. We can predict the behavior is not right. This person never does remote access, but their final intent, that we don't know. So it's until we call the customer, have that conversation. So yes, you're going to have those hit rates. We do. Sorry, the beginning of that question, can you repeat it?
Yeah. So basically, what is the current percentage of accuracy of based on the test results you?
Okay. Yeah. So accuracy wise, let me actually take a step back. One of the things that I love about behavioral biometrics is, no, it's not a silver bullet. You're not going to catch everything. The importance of having that, when we saw that triangle, it's that bottom layer, that collection layer. When things start going bad and you don't know the why, you need to have the data to do the forensics on it and say, what happened here? What was not right? And one of the best examples that I have was a malware outbreak called Flueball, where it looked like there was remote access happening, but it just money was going, and when leaving, and when people were, when banks were talking to people, they're saying, I didn't move anything, I didn't take any call, I'm not. It wasn't me, and we always hear customers say that, but these customers were not fitting the demographic, and we were seeing certain patterns. And once you have the data to do the forensics on it, what we quickly realized was that, based on the timing of the day, based on the movement on the phone, which was none, based on that there was zero touch on the screen, this is malware. It's not, and it's an unknown piece of malware. So it's about having that telemetry recording. You have to have the security cameras, and then if the intelligence didn't fire, now we have our threat analysts, which are brilliant, and they are available to customers, and you call them up and they're able to pull this data back out, almost 2,000 data points, and get to the bottom of things. But again, if you don't have anything recording behavior, you're not going to be able to do the forensics. on it, and then you're not going to be able to do that next step, which is, okay, let me recalibrate that model. So to the point of the accuracy, yes, the model will deviate, but that's again, we have to train them. So a lot of the success of this depends on customers also marking their fraud and marking the fraud correctly, so that the model learns this was a fraud session and of this specific type versus a legitimate session, so that then the model can continue to learn and grow and change it as the threats change.
Okay, so one question actually came to my mind on this presentation was, when it comes to data privacy, when we take decisions based on AI-based or behavior-based algorithms and all. So in here, this data will be saved within the bank or the financial institutions environment itself, right? It will not leave that particular data beyond that point, I believe. And then is this customer data will be pseudonymized as part of this process, where no PII data is, being specifically targeted for taking certain algorithm-based or non-bias based decisions.
Yeah, no, yeah, great observation. Look, I mentioned it earlier that we do not collect PII, and that includes we have no idea who the customers are. So BioCatch has zero clue. Everything is anonymized. Everything is just one really big string of numbers and letters, and we don't know who this profile belongs to. We would have no idea, and it's the privacy laws pretty much all around the world ensure that as well, that that we are not doing these things. Different countries are having different conversations right now, but we as a company do not collect anything that makes it identifiable. The data lives, it lives, like I mentioned earlier, up in an Azure cloud and secure environment there. And then we also transmit that data, that intelligence to the bank. Regarding the decision making, pretty much all the banks go through a model governance process. So these models aren't just randomly updated without the knowledge of the bank. There is a process, and there's a model governance process where that goes through. Nothing new, nothing different. The credit card industry has been doing that for quite a bit. There's other models, so it just follows that same process, that governance process around the models that others have.
Okay, so with the interest of the time, we'll take one more questions before we conclude our presentation. So this question also from the audience. So the question is, while biometrics are now being used to detect that an attempt to defraud is happening, is it also possible to collect and use biometric data of these unknown fraudsters as collected by financial institutions to possibly to identify, track, and apprehend these fraud actors?
Yes, the data is there. The fraudsters are good, and this is not just unique to banking or anything else. They try to hide their footsteps. So there's a lot of cooperation that would have to happen there with law enforcement as well to be able to. But yes, I mean the behavior is there. What they've done is there. Again, we can't link a behavioral profile to a specific human. But we do have all that telemetry that's been collected, and if a bank so chooses to share that with law enforcement, there are linkages that can be done from that data to be able to say this case and this case and this case are the same threat actor. That all can be shared amongst banks to protect themselves from that threat actor, and then to facilitate it over to law enforcement so that they can take some actions as well.
So with that note, I think it's time to conclude our detailed presentation. And Mr. Edgar Zayas, thank you very much for your time and sharing your insightful thought with the audience. And it's been a great pleasure to have you here.